What's so funny?
Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Cinema Psych podcast, the podcast where psychology meets film. I am your host, Dr. Alex Swan, and today's episode is going to be about an interesting film. Came out last year. Joaquin Phoenix won all of the Best Acting awards for it. Yeah, that's right. We are laughing along with The Joker. The Joker, or just Joker, I guess. Just Joker. So, spoiler alert to anyone who hasn't seen it yet. We are going to be talking about aspects of the film that sort of ruin it. In a sense, maybe not ruin it, but at least modify how you would view it the first time round. If you don't care about that, keep on listening. If that bothers you a little bit, then pause this and come right back after you've done watching it. It is out on video, DVD, whatever you want to call it these days. Download, streaming, whatnot. So, yeah. So the movie came out last year. All right. And by Todd Phillips. Yeah, the same guy who did Hangover. Like, who would have thought, right? But yeah, same guy. And again, like I said, Joaquin Phoenix stars as the titular bad guy. I want to say upwards of one of the most known villains of all 20th century 21st and 20th century literature. I mean, we know a lot about him, right? From his dealings with Batman for decades upon decades upon decades. And there have been plenty of iterations of Joker. You got the Cesar Romero Joker. You've got the Jack Nicholson Joker. You've got the Joker who shall not be named, Jared Leto, in Suicide Squad. And, a few here. Mark Hamill, perhaps my favorite Joker. Mark Hamill voiced Joker in all of the Batman animated series through a good portion of the last 25 years. He's been doing it for a while. And then we have this one by Joaquin Phoenix. And so we're going to explore the aspects of that. And I'm really excited. And it's a pretty interesting topic to discuss these days, because society is not doing so hot. So we're going to chat about that. My guest host today is friend of the show, Dr. Wind Goodfriend. Wind, how are things going in the age of the COVID pandemic?
I hesitate to be too happy, but I honestly am doing okay. Just the sheer
That's
the
good. No,
sheer
that's
the
fine.
sheer reduction of meetings at work has made me a lot more productive. So I'm getting a lot of work done. I miss my students. That's the main thing. I got into this profession to work with students, and I only get to do that virtually. So that's the part that's bringing me down. But otherwise, I'm doing okay.
Excellent. I'm glad to hear that. Well, the film that we are talking about today, as I mentioned at the top of the show, is Joker. I very silly called it The Joker, but it's actually just Joker.
Right.
And I wanted to bring you on to talk about Joker because you had a book or a book chapter that you'll talk about at the end. We'll probably sprinkle it in here and there about the relationship and specifically the domestic violence regarding the relationship between Joker and Harley Quinn. Now, of course, the movie does not explore any of that because this is pre Joker being a Batman villain, right? Bruce Wayne in the film is a little boy, right?
Right, it's the origin story for Joker.
Yeah, so it's the origin story for Joker, but I wanted to bring you on because you talked about that book chapter in a previous episode, and I thought, you know what? That'd be a great conversation buddy to have for this particular film, right? And I think before we jump into any of the psych, we do need to say that I gave a spoiler alert disclaimer earlier, but I think another disclaimer is worth it, and that is that we are not clinical psychologists, right?
Absolutely not. I have zero training in clinical or counseling psychology.
Yeah, we do not do any of that at all. So, but I think even with that said, I think it is useful to explore some of the tangentially related topics, and I think the things that you and I picked out from the film were maybe not necessarily clinical. Like, we're not sitting here diagnosing Arthur Fleck for, what kind of disorder he has. So, I think we can safely discuss some of the other psychological concepts that are present in the film, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. This film is chock full of possible psychological topics, and it's just absolutely complicated and layered and nuanced. And so, any sub area of psychology, I think, would have things to say about this
Yeah,
about this
and
movie.
I think that fits a larger idea about superheroes and supervillains. I know a lot is written about superheroes and their particular brand of psychology, but I would say that supervillains also fit something to chat about too. So not much is written about supervillains, and not much is explored in their origins or their underpinnings, and so, or their psychology. And so I think it was a useful movie to put into perspective. Maybe not a modern telling of the Joker, but a recent retelling of the Joker, because it's set in what appears to be the 1980s, maybe the late 1970s. So we have this recent idea about the Joker and his origins and the psychology that might change a person or influence a person to act in certain ways. And so I think those are the things that we can explore in this episode. And so the first thing I think that that you can speak to specifically, Wind, considering the book chapter about Joker and Harley Quinn, is the violence in the movie. What would you say about the violence in the movie?
Well, as you've said, my area, I'm a social psychologist, and my specific area of
Mm-hmm.
expertise is on relationships. And I've been doing a lot of research for the last 15 years on relationship violence, abusive relationships, domestic violence, whatever term you want to use. And one of the things that I thought really stood out in Joker is the fact that we see intergenerational transmission. So that's a term.
Oh,
That's a
right.
term that we
Okay.
use in terms of if you grew up in a family of origin that had violence, where you experienced it or even witnessed it, it makes you much more
Okay.
likely to be a violent adult or to be the victim of violence as an adult. So you are
Okay.
more likely to be either a perpetrator or a victim survivor of relationship violence yourself. So in Joker, although
Okay.
he his relationship with Sophie is a little bit complicated, as I think we'll talk about a little bit later. Um,
Sure.
the
Yeah.
fact that he grew up with violence from when he was an infant um, reflects his higher likelihood of becoming a violent adult.
Yeah, that's true. And you see kind of in the beginning of the film, he seems quite pacifistic. Um, he doesn't is the victim of violence immediately. But he tries to stay away from it as best he can, especially in the on the bus,
Right.
where we first learn about his laughing disorder, and then on the train, which instigates the whole movie, right, where he kills the three. He doesn't want to deal with them, but they come and bother
Well,
him.
and
Um,
even the very first scene of the movie is he's holding the sign outside of the store, and the kind of gang of youths steals his sign and beats him up.
right,
So the
and
very
so
beginning is violent.
yeah, the very beginning is definitely violent.
And the first time that he's violent, when you're talking about that train scene, arguably he is violent to protect the woman that these other guys are harassing, right? So I'm
Oh,
not
right,
trying to
yes,
defend what he
the
does. Don't get
woman,
me
yeah,
wrong, but you could
right,
argue that that's kind of the instigator for him.
yeah. That's true. So, with respect to Arthur being violent and a victim of violence first, and then a perpetrator second, as we see as the movie progresses, he kills the three men, and then he kills the large ex co-worker who worked at the clown business with him. He
And
kills
the
that
guy who gave
guy,
him the gun.
and then he kills Murray, Robert De Niro, at the end being interviewed on the talk
Right.
show, right? And he also acts very violently toward his relationship with Sophie, his supposed girlfriend throughout the film. We learn later that that she's not that his relationship with her is not real. She's real, but his relationship with her isn't real. And then I think I know that the final act of on-screen violence is Murray, but I think the crescendo of violence is actually against his own mother.
I think that's certainly one of the climactic points in the movie is when he decides to kill his own mother. Uh, that's
Yeah.
a turning point for him, where he's kind of saying goodbye to his past. He's saying goodbye to the person he thought he was this whole time, and he's really deciding to become Joker.
Yes, because we learn sort of partway through the movie, almost halfway through the movie, that that his mother actually suffers from some sort of delusional or schizophrenic disorder, some sort of psychotic
Yeah, when
disorder.
he goes to the
Uh,
mental hospital and gets her
yeah,
records, The official
Hmm.
diagnosis is delusional psychosis and narcissistic personality disorder.
Okay, so that's a lot to unpack there.
Right.
Um, so delusional
So that would
psychosis,
be probably
that's
schizophrenia.
the false. Yeah, so that would be like the false
Right.
beliefs. So the main false belief that she has is that Arthur is the love child of her and Thomas
Right.
Wayne. Thomas Wayne being the father of Bruce Wayne,
Right.
Batman, right? We do meet both of those people. We meet Thomas Wayne, and we also meet Bruce, who is a young
Hmm.
boy, in a really creepy scene where Arthur goes to Wayne Manor and like sticks his fingers in Bruce's
To
mouth.
make it smile.
That's just
Yeah.
like, yeah, to make him smile. And I read very briefly before we started recording that there's a crowd on the internet that believes that uh, all the Joker wants to do is make Batman laugh,
Well, that's
and Batman's just not having any of it.
that's an interesting
So
view. I
yeah, so so Arthur goes there, and he's, so back to his mom, Penny Fleck. She says constantly tells him that he is the love child of them, while she was a I guess a caretaker or a maid at Wayne Manor,
Yeah, it's kind of unclear what her
working
job
directly
was,
for the
as a
Waynes.
secretary or a maid or something like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so just to play devil's advocate here, just one of the things that I love about this film is I think one view is she's completely made this up.
Hmm.
He's not related to the White Waynes. She was
Hmm.
delusional and sort of fabricated this whole thing. But when he
Hmm.
confronts her about it, she says, "Oh, that adoption paper that you saw, that was completely fabricated so that he would protect his own reputation." And one potential view is that she was telling the truth, and that Wayne certainly has enough power and money to just kind of whitewash this whole love child thing because it would hurt his reputation. So the other part of her diagnosis that I think is really interesting is the narcissistic personality disorder, because she does not come across as
Yes.
narcissistic to me at all.
Mm. But I think that might also feed the other narrative, or the first narrative that you said, which was that he's not the love child. He being Arthur Fleck, not the love child of Penny and Thomas Wayne, because the narcissism is directing, as far as I understand it, the narcissism is directing her to feed into the delusion.
Right. I think that that's what they're arguing in the film, but her
Sure.
her character doesn't seem narcissistic to me in any other way. She seems very meek, very submissive. I don't see narcissism coming from her. Now, maybe it's because that was 30 years ago and she's different now.
Sure, but so there's some flashbacks of that scene when he's reading the dossier of Penny Fleck, and they flash back to her being
Right.
interviewed by a psychiatrist.
We went over this, Penny. You adopted him. We have all the paperwork right here.
That's not true. Thomas had that all made up. So it stayed our secret.
You also stood by when one of your boyfriends repeatedly abused your adopted son and battered you. Penny, your son was found tied to a radiator in your filthy apartment, malnourished with multiple bruises across his body and severe trauma to his head.
I never heard him crying. He's always been such a happy little boy.
Like, it's made explicit that her boyfriend harmed him. You left him
Right.
chained to a radiator for a long time. And her response is, he was always a happy boy.
Right.
And the reason she saw that, or maybe she said that, was because she saw him just like laughing uncontrollably, chained to this radiator, thinking that it was a game that her boyfriend put him up to. So
That's possible. He might have also developed this weird condition as some kind of defense mechanism or coping mechanism. So as far as I know, again, not a clinical psychologist or medical doctor, but as far as I know, there isn't this kind of laughing disorder. I think they made that up for the character.
Yeah, Todd Phillips has come out and said that there isn't any sort of condition that he was aware of when they were writing the film and writing this whole thing. And Joaquin Phoenix also has said that he could make it his own if it wasn't real.
Sure. And so I think certainly sort of regardless of the Wayne question, he was definitely exposed to a lot of violence as a child. I think it's clear that she was the victim of violence. When we see that flashback, she's got bruises all over her. I think it's clear that social services saw the abuse that he was experiencing as a child. And so either way, the intergenerational transmission of violence is there. He was exposed to all of this violence as a child. He might have internalized these attitudes that violence is an okay way to communicate or to try to solve problems. He might be modeling what he saw there from his adoptive father or his mother's boyfriend. And depending on who his biological father really was, he might have in fact inherited some kind of, extra testosterone or something like that. We don't really know what the genetic link is for intergenerational transmission.
Yeah, we're not given that information about his past that has any reliability associated with it, right? Arthur is a unreliable narrator. He doesn't narrate the film, but he's an unreliable source as far as the storytelling is concerned. We don't get an accurate picture of his life because we find out specifically that he made up a relationship with a woman that lived down the hallway from him.
And it's interesting.
So everything he knows is put through a different lens for the viewer.
It's interesting to go back and watch it a second or a third time because the first time I saw the film, I didn't realize that he was hallucinating this entire relationship with Sophie. So, it's presented to the audience as, he just wants love. He's a reasonable,
he's wholesome
reasonable guy. He has this crush on this woman with his adorable little daughter, and it's kind of this line of hope that you see. And then the second time you watch it, you realize his whole demeanor is different every time he's with her. He's confident. Yeah. He's genuinely funny instead of creepy funny. And that's because it's all in his mind. It's the guy he wishes he were.
Mm-hmm. That is so true. That is so true. Once that mask is removed and it's revealed that he is not that guy, everything becomes suspect.
Right.
Everything becomes suspect. Gets into the he goes and sleeps inside his refrigerator. We don't actually know if he got the call, the call to be on the Murray show was real, if he was actually on the Murray show, all of this stuff. Everything after you've learned that he is not that guy,
Right.
is
suspect. And it in fact makes me question the entire movie up until the very last scene when he's in the mental hospital. Is the entire movie.
Yeah, so super spoiler alert, everyone. Super spoiler alert. So yeah, there is a conundrum on the internet, as movie analysts are wont to do. The big question is the entire film all in his head? And there are people who think that there are clues. So I watched one a few weeks ago. I don't remember exactly when it was, but I watched one where if you look at if there's a clock in any of the scenes, it says 11:11.
Huh. I did not know that.
Yeah. And I mean, you can't see it in the end. But when he is at the social service, the social worker's office, it's 11:11. When he is getting fired from work, it's 11:11. That you can see it on the time clock. Where they punch in and out. And then there's another clock, and I'm blanking what scene it's in, but it says 11:11.
Wow. I did not notice that.
Yeah, go back through, watch it again. Go back through, and you definitely will catch these little things. And the last little bit of that thing is he's laughing. So he's laughing and the social worker or the psychiatrist that's in the room with him is like, what's so funny? This woman, by the way, kind of looks like the social worker from before, but I don't think it's the same person.
It's not. I checked the actresses. They are different.
Okay. I think they intended that to be the case. But she asked him, what's so funny? And he says, you wouldn't get it. And it's like, whoa. Did he just make that whole thing up?
Maybe that's why he's laughing. He just had this very amusing fantasy, which was what we saw as the movie.
Yeah. Exactly. And I think that brings us to a very good segue in the chat, which is, I think, one of the bigger aspects of the film that I picked up on, which was just the dour attitude toward mental illness that is presented in the film. And how much stigma mental illness carried, right? Again, this film is late 20th century, but still also carries, right? It carried maybe more than today, but also just it still carries it.
Absolutely.
Right?
There's a lot of research from lots of areas of psychology, including social psychology, that shows a pretty definite stigma against mental illness and people with mental illness. And you don't even have to be a psychologist to see this in coverage of violent acts. Usually some piece of that coverage will imply that the person who did the violent act is mentally ill, which therefore also implies all people with mental illness are violent, dangerous people.
Right, and that's obviously false. I don't know if anybody's ever, any of these stigma folks have ever, people who have stigma to, or express the stigma. I don't know, am I saying that right? I don't know if stigma can be a verb. But you
Five.
know what I'm saying, right? People who hold the negative beliefs and attitudes toward mental
Yep.
illness. That's what I'm trying to say. Have they ever seen how thick the DSM is? Because it's a thick book. It's
Yeah.
a thick book full of various diagnoses and illnesses and issues, and not all of them have anything to do. Quite, I would say the majority of them have nothing to do with violence, right?
Well, again, I'm not the biggest expert on the DSM-5, but I think in general, the people who are making the associations between mental illness and violence are not experts in psychology or clinical
Yeah, that
health.
checks out.
Also, even though I don't have any formal training on mental illness or clinical psych, when I was in grad school, just to pay the bills for 2 years, I worked as a security guard in a mental hospital. And
Wow, I want to hear that story later.
yeah, well, it is a kind of an interesting story how I even got that job. But I worked there for 2 years, and I had a day shift, so the patients were up and around. And honestly, in 2 years, I never felt concerned about the patients hurting me. It was really just to. I did things like walk them to the cafeteria, things like that. So I was there for, I think, people's kind of peace of mind, and just in case
Mhm.
anything violent happened, but nothing ever did. And so it really it hurts people who have mental illness to have this association. I think it further, you know, sends the message that they're unpredictable, they're untrustworthy, you shouldn't hire them, you shouldn't befriend them. And that's just going to
Yeah.
make matters worse. And it's a really oversimplification of people who are violent to just blame it on mental illness, because there are so many people with mental illness who choose not to be violent. And so it's really a societal problem.
Yeah, I agree. And the scene that I wanted to highlight is when, as is early in the film, Arthur goes to the social worker that I mentioned a little bit ago.
Is it just me? Or is it getting crazier out there?
It is certainly tense. People are upset. They're struggling, looking for work. These are tough times. How about you? Have you been keeping up with your journal?
Yes, ma'am.
Great. Did you bring it with you? Arthur, last time I asked you to bring your journal with you for these appointments. Can I see it?
I've been using it as a journal, but also as a joke diary. Funny thoughts or observations. I think I told you I'm pursuing a career in stand-up comedy.
No, you didn't.
I think I did.
I just hope my death makes more sense than my life. How does it feel to have to come here? Does it help to have someone to talk to?
I think I felt better when I was locked up in the hospital.
And have you thought more about why you were locked up?
Who knows? I was wondering if you could ask the doctor to increase my medication.
Arthur, you're on 7 different medications. Surely they must be doing something.
I just don't want to feel so bad anymore.
Well, here's the problem, Arthur. We don't have funding anymore, and we're gonna have to stop meeting. And I don't know when funding's coming back
Right.
for the social services. And so Gotham City is on the brink of just kind of failing its most desperate and needy citizens because social services are crumbling. And I think that instigates Arthur somewhat down a hole because now this anchor is gone and there's nothing left for him to hold on to, and so he's just gonna fall down that hole, and whatever that hole leads to is what he ends up doing, and then obviously those aspects manifest in the film, killing people, etc. And it all hinges on the fact that he no longer has this safety net of social services.
Right. He mentions later that he's stopped taking his medication, and that he feels that change. He doesn't have that person, that confidant, that he can share his feelings with. I'm sure he stopped doing his journaling. He has none of these safety nets, like you're saying. So I think one of the points of this movie is that society has failed him, and that doesn't justify what he's done. But I do think it's a message in the film that people who do have mental illness often just want someone to listen to them, want some resources, want respect. The people in the mental hospital where I worked, they were just people. They just wanted some
Yeah.
help, and really they wanted to be respected as human beings. And I think that that's one of the messages of this film, is that it's easy to label people, and that people don't like being labeled.
Yeah, and it just it goes to show how much these issues, the psychological disorders, etc., require help. I'm sure these folks just needed some help. And sometimes immediate family members or friends can't provide that help because they're not equipped to provide that help. And so you need these social safety nets in order to help the people who can't help themselves.
And one of the, I think, brilliant lines in this movie is when Wayne Sr. is being interviewed, and he says, the people who haven't made successes of themselves are basically lazy, worthless jokers. And that's where he gets the inspiration for his own name, is he's taking this label and saying, hey, if you're going to call me that, then that's how I'm going to act.
Yeah, that. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps, everybody. Who cares about a coronavirus? Just pull yourself up by your bootstraps. You'll be fine.
You don't need resources or medicine.
He said sarcastically.
Right.
So you had laid out this idea of the mental illness in society, using a model that is so eloquent within psychology, and that's the biopsychosocial model. Do you want to break that down? That the aspects that you saw of the biopsychosocial model in the film?
Yeah. So for a long time, mental illness was misunderstood, and the idea was, you being possessed by a demon, or you're a witch, or something like that is going on. And then for a while, the idea was, it's all medical neurotransmitters are, not functioning correctly in your brain. And I think the modern, both medical and psychological view is that what we call the biopsychosocial model, which is that all of us are a combination of factors that are partially biological, partially psychological, so things like our personality
Yep.
traits, and partially social. We are the products
Yep.
of our culture and how we were raised and how other people treat us. And so the simplification of saying Joker is Joker because of X, that's definitely going to be an oversimplification. So it's this complicated web of factors that makes all of us who we are.
Yeah, I agree. And so again, so the biological stuff that you saw then in the film that we could put a pin on.
So it's possible that he inherited some tendencies towards schizophrenia. We know that schizophrenia is at least partially genetically linked. People who have
Sure. Yep.
schizophrenia usually have someone within one generation of their family who also have
Right.
symptoms. So if his mother was his biological mother, that's certainly more possible. We also, again, don't know what the biology was of his father, but we know that he seems to have some kind of mental illness that medicine helps. So there might be some kind
Right.
of neurotransmitter imbalance for him that's biologically driving some of his symptoms. In terms of psychology, we have how does he interpret what's going on? Does he perceive people as making fun of him? Does he perceive people as potential friends versus potential enemies? His lack of ability to communicate with other people is certainly part of his psychology. And I want to talk a little bit more about personality in a minute, but just to finish out the biopsychosocial model, the social aspect, of course, is something that we've already discussed today. You know, the stigmatization, the self-fulfilling prophecy of if people assume I'm a violent person, then what's stopping me from being a violent person? The lack of social resources. No one really effectively listens to him or helps him.
Yeah, he's alone.
Yes.
He's a loner, and loneliness is a pretty tragic drug. Can literally kill you. And he's alone in the movie. Yeah, he has his mother, but his mother lied to him for a long time. And he eventually says, "You're not worth it to me at all." He is so lonely that he creates a fake relationship with a woman and then creepily goes into her apartment and like does the gun to the head thing.
And
I know it's a callback to their quote unquote first meeting
right.
where she does it,
but it's definitely creepy, over the line.
Yeah, considering that is if you think the movie is real and all of these things are actually happening, like, man, she'd be moving out that day.
Absolutely. So he's definitely lonely, and we see that also in his reaching out to the Waynes, wanting a father figure, wanting a potential brother.
Yeah, I like it. Yeah, brother. Yeah,
he wants a family.
He does. He wants a cohesive family unit that will bring him joy and validation. Things that he had basically is not receiving because he is a gig clown. He plays a gig clown, and obviously clowns don't get a lot of respect because they're creepy, creepy AF.
But I think that he's drawn to the clown thing because I think at that point he's genuinely trying to please other people and to get some positive feedback. You know, that's why he likes the gig with the kids, especially because, you know, they're laughing and singing along. And that's the job that actually causes him the most heartbreak when he gets fired.
Yeah, because he was trying to protect himself and the gun fell out of his pants, and he's just like, oh no.
So I don't think that he was originally a clown because he was a creepy clown. I think he was originally a clown because he genuinely wanted to be like a kid clown.
Yeah, sure. I will say that even kid clowns are
Oh, I
creepy
totally agree
AF.
with you. Yeah, you're like the
Whether he went into there, yeah, I don't think he went into the profession to be
right.
creepy, but yeah, he strikes me as or going in, he strikes me as like choosing that as a profession, so to speak, because he also has the laugh and the
That's
laugh
true. That's
disorder.
true. So it's a job that he
And
can keep with his condition.
yeah, it's a job that he can keep with his condition because he could just say that, I'm just laughing because this is how I
Right.
am. I'm a clown. And sort of mask it as a mental illness. I do want to bring up one last point about the stigma and all of this talk about the biopsychosocial model is you see the stigma very clearly in the beginning of the film when he is on the bus. And he's sitting behind a little boy, and the little boy is looking at him, and he's doing really good bit comedy, making his face do funny things. And the kid is laughing, and the mother turns around and is like, "Can you stop bothering my
Right.
kid?" And it's just like, "Whoa, lady, calm down, all right? You're on a bus. What do you expect is going to
Yeah.
happen, first of all? Second of all, he starts laughing uncontrollably because he can't, and so he hands her this card that explains his condition because he can't talk when he's laughing, which is so cruel. Just on a side note, the fact that we can't talk while we're laughing is just a super bummer. So people are always asking, "Why are you laughing?" And you're like, "I can't." And he hands her the card, and she looks at it, and she scoffs. She like visibly rolls her eyes. She sighs and scoffs so loudly, and you're like, "Geez, lady."
Yeah.
And, society's just, kicking him down, kicking him when he's down, figuratively and literally.
Okay, so that's it. You're crazy. That's your defense for killing 3 young men?
No. They couldn't carry a tune to save their lives. Oh, why is everybody so upset about these guys? If it was me dying on the sidewalk, you'd walk right over me. I pass you every day and you don't notice me. But these guys, what, because Thomas Wayne went and cried about them on TV?
You have a problem with Thomas Wayne, too.
Yes, I do. Have you seen what it's like out there, Murray? Do you ever actually leave the studio? Everybody just yells and screams at each other. Nobody's civil anymore. Nobody thinks what it's like to be the other guy. You think men like Thomas Wayne ever think what it's like to be someone like me? To be somebody but themselves? They don't. They think that we'll just sit there and take it like good little boys, that we won't werewolf and go wild.
You finished? I mean, there's so much self-pity, Arthur. You sound like you're making excuses for killing those young men. Not everybody, and I'll tell you this, not everyone is awful.
You're awful, Murray.
Me? I'm awful? Oh yeah, how am I awful?
Playing my video. Inviting me on the show. You just wanted to make fun of me. You're just like the rest of them.
You don't know the first thing about me, pal. Look what happened because of what you did, what it led to. There were riots out there. 2 policemen are in critical condition. You're laughing. You're laughing. Someone was killed today because of what you did.
I know. How about another joke, Murray?
No, I think we've had enough of your jokes.
What do you get
I don't think so.
when you cross
I think
a
we're
mentally
done
ill
with your
loner
jokes.
with
That's
a
it.
society that abandons him and treats him like trash?
Call the police,
I'll
Gene.
tell you what you get.
Call the police.
You get what you f***ing deserve.
That's true. I mean, to defend her, I think she's probably genuinely trying to protect her child from a creepy stranger. But I do think her
That's
reaction
fair. That's
was
fine.
a little bit uncalled for.
Maybe a bit
Right.
overreactive, but her reaction to his card and his
Right, that's true.
condition,
She
I
certainly
think
could have.
was
She
100%
could have
rude.
some empathy for him, for sure.
Yeah. Just imagine having a laughing disorder like that,
Right.
right?
I think a sort of parallel to that is people who have Tourette's, who
Sure,
genuinely
yeah.
can't control some of their actions or verbalizations, and it really is
Mhm.
kind of socially embarrassing.
Yeah, and how many folks with Tourette's carry around cards like, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I have Tourette's right now," or "I have Tourette's right now." Jeez, what am I saying? "I have Tourette's. Please forgive my outbursts." Like, people don't carry around cards like
Right.
that. We should just be understanding of people and maybe reflect before we make judgments,
Absolutely.
right? So you did mention personality.
Right.
And I am super excited to hear about this one because I have never heard this before. So what's this idea about personality that you spot in the film?
Well, I'm teaching a class right now on the psychology of personality, and
Online.
yes, it was originally face to face. Now it is online. And so we talk about various ways to think about personality. And one of those ways, not the only way, is a trait perspective. So, what are some interesting personality
Right.
traits that we could measure and define and use to predict behavior? So, in
Right.
2002, an article came out identifying three personality traits that the argument was that these three traits go together, and so they're usually correlated. If you have one, you often will have the other two. And they are
Okay.
associated with criminal behavior. They're associated with
Okay.
cheating and general lack of empathy toward other people. They're associated with what we call mate poaching, which is trying to steal somebody else's husband or wife. And the three traits.
Or just partner, just
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
partner, right? Could be a girlfriend and stuff.
Um,
Okay.
and so the
Or
cluster of
boyfriend.
traits is called the dark triad because
Wow, that's such an
yeah,
ominous
absolutely,
name.
ominous is the perfect word. And the idea is that if you have someone who has high levels of even two out of these three traits, that they're probably much more dangerous. Now,
Oof.
most people
Okay.
don't reach kind of a clinical or extreme level of these three traits, but
Okay.
the average person, could vary in these three traits, and that might be a warning sign that the person is potentially not going to be your best friend. And so I thought it would be fun to talk about what these three traits are.
Okay. Yeah. So what are the traits?
Okay, so the first one is called Machiavellianism. And of course, that's named after the Italian philosopher Machiavelli, who wrote The Prince.
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
the book, of course, was all about how to be a ruler, but it was basically suggesting that the best rulers are really manipulative of others, and if you had to have loyalty from your people through either love or fear, you should always choose fear. So it's basically how to like lie and be a horrible despot. And so
Yeah.
Machiavellianism now as a personality trait is the idea that you are someone who just kind of implicitly manipulates other people. You see other people as a means to an end. What can they do for me? And you're kind of a schemer. You like to, it's kind of like the long
Okay.
con. You like to
Yeah.
lie to
Mm-hmm.
people. You don't really care if it hurts them. You don't really have any kind of empathy for other people. It's all about what's in it for me.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Yep.
Machiavellianism. Oh man, I just butchered that. Okay.
It's okay. So Machiavellianism is the first one. I think we can see classic examples of how the Joker or Joker is portrayed, not only in this film, but in lots of other films, certainly in the comics. The fact that he comes up with these schemes, that he's constantly planning on destroying the entire city, he certainly wants this kind of like fame and notoriety, and he doesn't care who gets in his way. So I think he checks the box for Machiavellianism.
Okay, yeah, I would agree. Yeah.
Okay, so the second one I think is not so cut and dry when it comes to Joker, or at least how he's portrayed in this particular film. The second one is narcissism, which is interesting because his mother was theoretically diagnosed as having narcissistic personality disorder.
Mm-hmm.
So, narcissism,
Okay.
when it comes to the dark triad, is the idea that you perceive yourself as the smartest person in the room. You perceive that you are an expert on any topic. And even if you're not an expert, you can fake it so well that people won't notice. And you believe that no one else is really worthy of you. You are basically like the king of the castle in any situation, and you're sort of this undiscovered
Uh-huh.
genius. And if only
Okay.
people paid attention to you, they would see that you are absolutely amazing. So I think it's interesting to think there are a couple of qualities that apply to Joker in terms of narcissism. But in this particular film, I don't think he's portrayed as particularly narcissistic. He seems not to really like himself very much.
Maybe this is probably just a stretch, but I'm just listening to you explore the features of the personality trait. Maybe he thinks he is funnier than he actually
That's a good
is,
point.
and I mean, he sort of expresses this in a sort of roundabout way to Murray at the end of the
That's
movie.
true. I think
Like,
that's a good point. He does in his
so
fantasies, he sees himself as like the entire crowd at the comedy club is like laughing. Um, he
yeah,
perceives himself as being very successful with Sophie when that's all in his mind. So I
right.
guess you could argue that the fantasy version of his life is pretty narcissistic.
I've yeah. I think that fits it. So I think we can.
Okay.
I think we maybe not as narcissistic as his mother, according to her
Right.
diagnosis, but and that feeds that I think feeds her. I'm in the camp that thinks that that's all true. That feeds her delusion of being with Thomas Wayne when she actually wasn't.
And I think other portrayals of Joker show him as being more narcissistic. If you look at the comics
Oh
or
yeah, yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
yeah. That's very
Batman
true.
movies where he features, I think he's portrayed as more narcissistic in those versions. So I think we could check Machiavellianism. I think it's safe to check narcissism. You kind of talked me into that one. And then,
Okay.
and then the third trait in the dark triad is psychopathology. And I think this one is probably pretty strong. So psychopathology, the term psychopath is used by so many different fields and in so many different ways. It can be defined
Yeah,
in a variety of ways. I think criminal justice defined it slightly differently than psychology defines it, and even social psychology
sure.
versus clinical psychology I think have slightly different definitions. But in terms of the dark triad and how it was originally developed in this article, psychopathology is a basic lack of empathy for other people,
Mm-hmm.
the desire for notoriety and fame, and
Mm-hmm.
impulsiveness. So, in some ways, the impulsiveness goes against the long term scheming that we saw with Machiavellianism, but these two can be correlated. So, you can have a little bit of both. Um,
Oh,
so,
okay.
I think that certainly we see a lot of examples of psychopathology as defined in the Dark Triad in Joker. He certainly seems to have a
Yeah.
lack of empathy. He doesn't care much about really anyone else. Um,
Nope.
he, especially as the movie progresses, he seems to be really enjoying the attention and fame that he is getting. The fact that he's
At
started
it
this entire
and at the
movement.
very end. Yeah, at the very end, getting on top of the police
Yes,
car
absolutely.
and just sort
And he's
of
like the hero of the people.
basking. Yeah, I'm I'm motioning to Wind here in our video chat. He's just like
Right.
basking in the
Holding his
glory.
hands up in this kind of like Christ-like type of posture.
Yep.
His dancing with joy that he's finally sort of led this army of clowns who are going to kill the rich, right? Like he's become the icon for this certain population of the city, and that's the Joker. That is the person he becomes in this DC world, right? So so I think we see all three of these traits that we call the dark triad in Joker.
I would agree. The impulsiveness too. I wanted to add. We see his impulsiveness with murdering his ex coworker.
Right.
He just kind of just like, I'm just gonna do this right now. One could argue that it was impulsive to murder his mother.
Yep.
He could have been thinking about it, but it certainly is surprising when you first see it. Sorry, spoilers.
Hey, Penny. Plant your flag. I always hated that name. You know, he used to tell me that my laugh was a condition, that there was something wrong with me. There isn't. That's the real me.
Happy.
Happy. I haven't been happy 1 minute of my entire life. You know what's funny? You know what really makes me laugh? I used to think that my life was a tragedy. But now I realize it's a fucking comedy.
It's probably impulsive to go to Wayne Manor. It's definitely impulsive to stick your thumbs in somebody's mouth. That's not social distancing. Do not do that. And even when we're done with social distancing, do not stick your thumbs in a stranger's mouth, especially if it's a little boy. There are issues, so many issues with that. Don't do that.
Child. Don't put anything.
And so that's very impulsive. And then it's also impulsive that he goes in and sneaks into the opera to confront Thomas Wayne in the bathroom. So there's a lot of impulsivity with Arthur Fleck. That is for sure. And that sort of mirrors his comic book incarnations because there are definitely different comic incarnations, just like there are different film incarnations and other media incarnations of the Joker. But throughout many of the DC comic run of him being perhaps Batman's most famous arch enemy, is that he is constantly trying to do things that break up the status quo, bother Batman, like literally just like bother him. And there was oh man, I can't remember what it is. Maybe a listener can ping me on this one. But there is and it may be a Mark Hamill Joker voicing Joker thing, but there is something. It's just something that I read recently. It was just like Joker doesn't actually want to kill Batman.
That's absolutely true.
He wants somebody to play with.
That's exactly right. He wants Batman's attention.
Yes, Batman's attention. And so he does these impulsive things to get Batman's attention. Yes, okay. I'm glad that somebody else...
No, you're absolutely right. We see this in a couple of storylines, in the cartoon, in the comics. And you're absolutely right. Mark Hamill as the voice of Joker is fantastic.
Yeah, I said at the top of the show, he's my favorite Joker.
So we see the Joker planning all of these schemes to get Batman's attention, like to get Batman to come to where he is, to stop a nuclear bomb or something like that. but he doesn't actually want Batman to die, because it's like his brother, right? He
Yeah.
wants, like you said, sort of a playmate. He wants this kind of brother figure. That's what's fun for him. And for Batman to go away, now he's bored.
Yeah, that would be tragic, I think,
Oh,
for Joker.
from his
If Batman
perspective,
were,
yes.
imagine if like Riddler came out on top and like actually
Right.
killed Batman. You think I would imagine Joker would just be like, all right, Riddler, you're dead.
One of the
Sorry.
interesting dynamics between the Joker and Harley Quinn is she's kind of his like girlfriend / assistant. And
Yeah.
one of the classic scenes in their dynamic is that he's got this kind of scheme to try to trap Batman, and he can't really quite figure out how to make it work. And she solves the problem. She figures out how to make this work. It's going to be like hanging Batman upside down over some piranhas. And she figures out how to get this to happen. And he is absolutely enraged that she figured something out that he couldn't figure out, right? He wants to be the person on top. He wants to be the one figuring all of this out. So again, it goes into that narcissism.
Yeah.
But he really he seems to be driven by the game. And I think that's one of the reasons that he's called the Joker.
Okay. I like that. And it has nothing to do with cards.
Well, Jack Nicholson's Joker does.
Oh, don't get me started on Jack Nicholson's
If we're
Joker.
talking about all the movie
God.
incarnations of the Joker, we have to go.
Oh my gosh, I do not like what they did with that.
Okay, we won't talk about that.
Have you ever seen the devil dance in the pale moonlight? No, man, you didn't kill his parents. Get out of here, Jack Napier.
Okay, so I'm getting that you don't like the Jack Nicholson Joker.
He's fine. It's just, I don't like the retconning, so to speak, of the origins. I think Tim Burton tried to do too much by smashing the origins together. Okay. We didn't need another movie of Batman's origins, I suppose. Although that was the first
That
one.
was it really kind of set up the franchise.
Yeah. I do like Cesar Romero's trickster Joker. Obviously, who's supposed to be campy, played by a really wonderful actor who was like, "No, you may not shave my mustache. It's mine. Paint over it."
That is some classic chutzpah.
Yeah, exactly. And then garbage Jared Leto. As I said at the top of the show, garbage.
Heath Ledger did a great job, though. Heath Ledger could pull it off.
Heath Ledger, I think, is my favorite movie Joker.
Over Joaquin Phoenix?
Over Joaquin Phoenix,
wow.
yeah.
Okay, that's a statement.
And it's because he plays an anarchist version of Joker. And I think that plays well with Batman's need for order.
I have to say that I found
in the Dark Knight trilogy.
I found the Heath Ledger Joker more entertaining, more exciting. But of course, the Joaquin Phoenix Joker, in some ways, seems kind of like more realistic, and I think that's one of the reasons this
more
movie
realistic.
Is so scary.
And I think we're supposed to, as the audience, view him as a tragic anti-hero, as opposed to Heath Ledger's Joker, who is supposed to just be a psychopath.
Right.
An anarchistic psychopath, right? And we're not supposed to feel any empathy for him. We're supposed to be all 100% on Batman's side because Batman wants to bring order and justice to Gotham City. And there's this one guy who has weird scars on his face and paints his face red and white, who wants to blow stuff up, and we need to take care of him. We're not supposed to feel any sort of sympathy or empathy for Heath Ledger, but we're supposed to struggle with our heart that Arthur Fleck is dealing with this. Even though he kills a lot of people, we're still going to be like, man, that guy, he's just had a lot of stuff thrown at him. And, sometimes sometimes people just, you poke a bear and the bear's going to swipe at you.
So I think one of the brilliant...
Tiger King.
Oh, jeez. No episodes on Tiger King. So, one of the brilliant things about this film is not just the psychology of the film, but the psychology of reaction to the film.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I saw this in the theater when it originally came out with a friend, and near the end of the film, when sort of the people's rebellion is ramping up, several people in the theater were cheering, like, yeah, like we're on the Joker's side and we want him to go out and, murder a bunch of people. And my friend just walked out of that theater kind of like traumatized, and she's saying, like, how could people be on his side? And I sort of got it. Again, I'm not saying that I justify his actions or that this violence
Right. Yeah, but you don't need
appropriate
to
in any
justify.
kind of way. But I think the reason that
Right.
the film was so jarring for so many people is that you saw his side of the story.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Which, like we said it earlier at the start of the show, you don't get to see that sort of psychology from villains too often. Generally speaking, most villains are characterized as misanthropes, maladapted, or slighted by the hero, the protagonist, and so they seek revenge for that slight. I mean, Killian from Iron Man 3 is a good example of that. Like, Tony Stark pissed him off one day and tried to set fire to his life. So you just there a lot of villains are one-dimensional in that way, and they're only connected to the hero, whereas we see Arthur here as a complete multi-dimensional human that is tragic, and that's why people were cheering because and also the message was like the 99% versus the 1%,
like kill the rich,
Yep.
This whole
the 1% needs to go down sort of message, right?
But I think that,
so I mean, that's why people were cheering.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I'm excited about more movies that maybe kind of take this approach of people are complicated creatures. We saw this a little bit with Black Panther and the main villain being Killmonger, and you kind of get it. Like, he got a raw deal. His father was murdered.
He did, yeah.
His whole philosophy is like, we should be using our resources to help people in other countries. And at the end of the movie, they're like, yeah, good point. We agree with you. That was kind of a twist to this classic villain. Usually you don't end the movie by going, yeah, we're going to go ahead and do what you recommended. So I think I'm really looking forward to seeing more of this kind of movie where we see humans are not these two-dimensional characters that we've seen in movies for years and years. The more complicated the character can be, I think the more it will resonate with the audience.
Yeah, and I think the better storytelling you have, if you can humanize even the people that are maybe on the wrong end of the moral spectrum, but still humanize them. Obviously not give them a pass for what they did. I mean, Joker's still a bad guy. Still should go to prison, or at least, some sort of some sort of institution, psychiatric institution that is on lockdown.
Yeah, he needs to be in Arkham Asylum.
Shutter Island style. Yeah, or Arkham. Yeah. That's in universe. So yeah.
Right.
None of this Martin Scorsese stuff. But yeah, some sort of psychiatric facility to where it's what it appears he is at the end, but he's all walking out, with blood on his feet, and he's just like, whoa, what'd he do? No, not that psychiatrist. Oh. So I want to continue with the Your Thoughts segment, where I mention the various things that are thoughts of yours, get it, on the various films and what you might use them for in a psychological sense. Those sorts of things, of course. And so I want to thank the comments that I got again in the STP Facebook group. Wonderful thoughts as always. So Sabrina Ryder and Kristen B mentioned that the film is great to discuss how mental illness is portrayed, especially the stigma that is associated with it, and it pretty good as we've heard in this episode that the stigma is pretty real, right? Rich Zamora making a very good point of saying you should have a trigger warning or a content warning if you're going to show this in class, which is a very good idea. You always want to give your students the choice to grapple with such a gnarly film such as Joker. Bob Dubois talks about how he would use the film as a way to explore the biopsychosocial model and the factors that are associated with psychological disorders, which I think is pretty good, especially with the content of the film. Lyra Stein mentioned that she used the film to focus on schizotypal personality disorder, which is a personality disorder that has some psychosis features to it, I believe. Thanks again, everyone, for sharing your thoughts. Your Thoughts is a fun little segment that I like to keep doing. I'm definitely going to keep this as a running segment. I appreciate all of those individuals who contributed to this episode. Keep letting me know your thoughts. Well, I want to thank Goodfriend for joining me to discuss Joker. I think that was a real fun chat, and I learned something. A good episode is when I learn something.
Great.
That I can then take with me. So, Wind, while you say goodbye, is there anything you'd like to plug? Where folks can find out more about Joker?
Well, I will definitely take the opportunity to remind folks that you can go to any major bookseller and find the book called The Joker Psychology. The subtitle is Evil Clowns and the Women Who Love Them. And this is part of a series of books on the psychology of pop culture, edited by my friend Travis Langley. And in The Joker Psychology, I have a chapter on the abusive relationship between Joker and Harley Quinn.
Yes, I love it. I gotta get my hands on that one of these days. Maybe it's going to be coming up as a COVID birthday present. I don't know, because I think that's what my birthday's turned out to be, just like my son's. Oh, sate. Anyways, listener, thanks for all of the support that you have given over these last several episodes. This was lucky episode number 13, where we talked about Joker. And the last 2 episodes, I've given you a challenge. And that challenge has been share this podcast with 5 of your friends, colleagues, coworkers, housemates during your self-isolation. The internet still works for this sharing challenge. So 5 of your friends, family members, or colleagues. Hey, while you're in your isolation in your house with all of these people that you live with, just like, instead of putting headphones in, just play it on speaker. And then everyone can listen
sit
to
around,
it.
Sit around the fire and listen just like an old-time radio.
Yeah, old-time radio. I love that, Win. Thank you so much. So if you let other people know, this podcast will grow. Man, I love rhyming. So 5 friends, the challenge is still on. Please keep sharing, liking, subscribing, etc. The show is fairly unique, and I really enjoy making it, so we appreciate all of the support. And until the next episode, thanks for listening.